Claire Montgomery, a 34-year-old woman, seemed to have the perfect life. Living in an elegant apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, she balanced a successful career as a lawyer at a prestigious Chicago firm with an 8-year marriage to Mark Callahan, a businessman known for his contagious energy and generosity. Claire believed that, despite the challenges, they were a solid couple, built on trust and love. But the perfection in her life had some peculiarities. Mark's relationship with Emily, his 26-year-old half-sister, was something Claire always viewed as a reflection of his kindness. Emily, who had lost her parents in a tragic accident at 16, had found a safe haven in Mark. Claire had never questioned their closeness. After all, she didn't have siblings herself and couldn't understand that type of bond. Emily was charming. Blonde, with bright eyes and a constant smile, she brought an air of lightness to any environment. She often dropped by unannounced for dinner or spent the night at their apartment, something Claire considered natural. Mark has always been like a father to her, Claire thought, trying to justify Emily's reliance on her brother. Over time, though, certain things began to bother her. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, muffled laughter between Mark and Emily when they were alone in the kitchen, quick and knowing glances, and the way Emily always seemed to know intimate details about the couple. One day, while Claire was reviewing documents in the living room, she overheard Emily mention the restaurant where she and Mark had celebrated their wedding anniversary the week before. "I thought only the two of us knew about that," Claire thought, but she dismissed the doubt as paranoia. The turning point began to take shape on a Saturday morning. Mark had said he needed to travel to New York for work, something common in his routine. Hours later, Emily showed up, saying she wanted to spend the weekend with Claire, an unusual gesture from someone who preferred her brother's company. That afternoon, while Claire was making coffee, Emily's phone rang, and she answered it in a rush. "Yes, I'm here." "Don't worry, everything's fine," Emily said in a low voice, almost whispering. Claire didn't pay much attention until she heard what sounded like Mark's name. When she casually asked who Emily was talking to, the young woman laughed nervously. "Oh, just a friend. Nothing important," she said, avoiding eye contact. The discomfort grew like a seed planted in fertile soil. Claire began to notice other things. Mark often returned from trips with gifts that perfectly matched Emily's tastes. He mentioned business meetings at places she knew were his sister's favorites, yet he was never willing to share more details. One evening, while trying to organize the couple's closet, Claire found something that seemed out of place, a small bag containing papers, hidden in a drawer Mark rarely used. Curious, she opened it and found hotel receipts and an invoice from a jewelry store in New York. The catch? The date matched his most recent trip. Claire's stomach churned, but her mind fought to rationalize it. "It's just a gift for Emily," she thought, trying to ignore the darker possibility. Even so, she stored the evidence in a separate drawer, determined to observe more closely before confronting him. The following weekend, Mark and Claire attended a charity event hosted by his company. Emily, as usual, was invited, which Claire found peculiar, as families were rarely present at such events. While Mark gave his speech, Emily watched him with a sparkle in her eyes Claire had never noticed before. It wasn't the pride of a sister, it seemed more intimate, more possessive. Later that evening, as Mark and Claire danced, Emily approached and interrupted. "Can I steal my brother for a moment?" she asked with a radiant smile. Claire agreed but felt a pang in her chest as she watched them walk away, engaged in animated conversation. When they returned, Mark seemed uneasy, but Claire chose not to ask. Days later, while Claire was at the office, she received an unexpected call from Sophie, her best friend. "Claire, do you have a minute?" Sophie asked hesitantly. "Of course, what's up?" I don't know how to say this, but I saw Mark at LeBlanc last night. He wasn't alone." Claire's heart sank. "Who was he with?" "There was a blonde woman with her hair tied up. They seemed very close." Claire refused to believe Sophie could be talking about Emily. Yet the pieces were starting to come together in a disturbing way. Claire knew she needed answers, but what troubled her most was how her perfect life seemed to be falling apart without warning. The comfort of her home, a space she had always considered a refuge, now felt cold and distant. As she looked out the living room window, the view of Lake Michigan no longer offered its usual peace. Claire began to reflect on what she really knew about Emily and Mark. She had always accepted the story that Emily was Mark's half-sister, the result of a brief relationship their father had before marrying Mark's mother. Emily had grown up in California, and they had reconnected when she was 18, after her parents' deaths. What once seemed like a simple, moving narrative now felt like a tangled web of doubts. Claire was a pragmatic woman, someone who dealt with facts rather than assumptions. This trait had helped her build a brilliant career in corporate law. But in this case, the facts were vague, and her emotions were running high. She began observing Emily through a different lens, noticing things she had previously overlooked. How Emily always appeared impeccably dressed, as if trying to impress someone. How her presence seemed to diminish Claire, even without direct words. Most importantly, how Emily seemed to know intimate details about the couple's life, things Claire had never shared with her. Emily, on the other hand, seemed relaxed and carefree. She continued invading Claire's space, borrowing clothes, or offering to help with dinners and events. Her laughter, once light-hearted, now felt like a mocking echo in the house. Mark was also changing. Naturally charismatic, Claire noticed his vibrant energy was being replaced by something more tense, as if he was constantly on edge. He avoided long conversations, and every time Claire mentioned Emily, his expression hardened. "Mark, is everything okay?" Claire asked one night as they ate dinner together. "Of course. Why wouldn't it be?" he replied, averting his gaze. But his tone betrayed the truth. Something was wrong, and Claire knew she couldn't ignore it any longer. Sophie, Claire's best friend, became an important source of support. Over the weeks, she began helping Claire piece things together. Sophie was the opposite of Claire, impulsive and outspoken, someone who never hesitated to say what was on her mind. "You need to face this head-on, Claire. If it's what it looks like, well, it's better to know now than to keep living in this bubble of uncertainty." It was Sophie who suggested Claire dig deeper into Mark and Emily's relationship. "I know this sounds extreme, but what if you hired someone? A detective, maybe." "They're good at this kind of thing," Sophie said. Claire hesitated. She wasn't the type to invade someone's privacy, but these circumstances were different. This wasn't just about curiosity, it was about her sanity and the survival of her marriage. While Sophie encouraged Claire, Emily seemed to be getting bolder. One evening, while Mark was in the shower, his phone rang in the living room. Claire, organizing papers at the dining table, saw Emily's name flash on the screen. Something about the urgency of the call made her answer. "Mark? Hey, it's me. I'm ready for tomorrow. You know where to meet me." Emily's voice was casual, but the message was full of implications. Before Claire could say anything, the call ended. Her blood ran cold. What exactly was Mark planning with Emily? The city of Chicago, with its bustling urban life, began to reflect Claire's internal turmoil. Every familiar corner seemed strangely hostile. The restaurant where they used to dine, the cafe where Claire grabbed her daily latte, everything felt like a reminder of the world she thought she knew, now unraveling. At home, Claire started spending more time alone. The silence of the apartment, once comforting, became oppressive. Even when Mark was there, the emotional distance was palpable. Sophie brought another unexpected revelation. While researching Emily, she discovered something strange: records of her life before the age of 18 were scarce. No old photos with Mark, no significant mentions on social media, no school records. It was almost as if Emily had appeared out of nowhere. "What if she's not who she says she is?" Sophie asked. It was too much for Claire to process. Could Emily be lying about her entire identity? Or, worse, had she and Mark planned this together? In the days following Emily's call to Mark, Claire felt the ground beneath her feet growing increasingly unstable. Suspicion gnawed at her peace, and the behavior of the two, Mark becoming more evasive, and Emily inexplicably confident, only deepened the mystery. Determined to uncover the truth, Claire decided to act. After much reluctance, Claire made the decision to hire a private investigator. Sophie had researched local detectives and found someone with a solid reputation. "Claire, you're not being paranoid. You're protecting your life," Sophie said, sensing her friend's hesitation. The detective, a discreet man named Greg Harper, assured Claire he would be careful and effective. He asked for details about Mark and Emily's schedules, the places they frequented, and any suspicious behavior. Claire provided everything she knew, though the weight of guilt lingered. "Is it wrong to do this?" she asked Sophie. "What's wrong is betraying a devoted wife." "You're just seeking the truth," Sophie replied firmly. Greg's first update came a few days later. He had followed Emily to a downtown hotel, where she met Mark at the bar. Greg described the interaction as too intimate for siblings. The two spent nearly 3 hours together before heading upstairs to a room registered in Mark's name. When Claire received the photos, it felt as though the ground had vanished beneath her feet. There they were, Mark and Emily, sitting close together, laughing, exchanging looks that Claire could only describe as complicit. Anger bubbled inside her, but the shock kept her frozen. She knew she needed more information before confronting them. In the days that followed, Mark continued to act as if everything was normal, or at least, he tried. He still displayed affection at times, but something felt off. One evening, when Claire casually mentioned that Emily had called while he was out, Mark reacted with visible nervousness. "She just wanted to confirm something about a family dinner, nothing important," he said, but his response was too quick, too rehearsed. Claire decided to push him. "Mark, do you think everything is okay between us?" "Of course. Why do you ask?" "You seem distant lately," Claire replied, trying not to sound accusatory. Mark forced a tense smile. "It's just work. You know how it can be." But Claire knew that was a lie. 2 weeks later, Greg returned with more information. He had uncovered something Claire never expected: Emily wasn't Mark's sister. At least, not on paper. "I've searched birth records, certificates, and family histories. There's no evidence that Emily is the child of Mark's father," Greg explained. "She might be lying about who she is." The revelation left Claire breathless. Everything she believed about Emily was a fabrication. It explained the lack of records about the young woman, but raised even more unsettling questions. Who was Emily, really? And why was Mark maintaining this lie? Claire decided to confront Emily directly. One evening, while Mark was out, Claire invited her over for dinner. At first, Emily enthusiastically accepted, but upon arriving, she quickly realized Claire wasn't interested in casual conversation. "Emily, who are you really?" Claire asked bluntly. Emily blinked, feigning confusion. "What are you talking about? I know you're not Mark's father's daughter. There are no records." "Nothing. Who are you?" For a moment, Emily remained silent, but then something shifted in her expression. Her friendly smile gave way to a calculated coldness. "Do you really want to know, Claire?" Emily said, crossing her arms. "Fine, I'll tell you. But I doubt you'll like it." Emily revealed that she had met Mark years ago while working as a bartender at an event he hosted. What started as a casual connection quickly turned into an affair. When Mark realized Claire never questioned his relationship with the newly discovered sister, he suggested Emily assume the role. "It was perfect," Emily said with a cruel smile. "I could be close to him without raising suspicion." "And you? So confident, so focused on your work, you didn't even notice." Emily's words hit like a punch. Claire felt as if everything in her life, her marriage, her home, her trust, was crumbling before her eyes. But instead of succumbing to the pain, she forced herself to stay composed. "And you think this will last?" Claire asked, with a firmness that even surprised herself. "You think Mark will choose you?" Emily laughed. "I've already won, Claire. You're just realizing it now." Claire knew she needed time to process everything. She thanked Emily for her clarity and ended the evening with an icy smile. But inside, she was boiling. That night, alone in the apartment, Claire began to plan her next move. She wouldn't let Mark and Emily get away with this. Following Emily's revelations, Claire felt as though the ground beneath her feet no longer existed. Everything she believed about her marriage had been built on an elaborate lie. But she wasn't ready to play the victim. Instead, she began crafting a plan to dismantle Mark and Emily's scheme, with patience, strategy, and precision. Claire began leveraging the resources at her disposal. Working at a prestigious law firm, she had contacts in the financial and legal sectors who could help her investigate Mark's secrets. One such connection was Peter Lang, a forensic investigator Claire had collaborated with on corporate cases. Peter was meticulous and trustworthy. When Claire explained the situation, he eagerly took on the challenge. "If Mark and Emily are hiding something, I'll find it," he assured her. In less than a week, Peter returned with explosive findings. Mark had bank accounts under the name of a shell company. Transactions revealed large sums of money being funneled into a trust where Emily was the sole beneficiary. Mark was financing Emily's lifestyle. Her apartment rent, luxury car, and even international trips were being paid for from the account. Mark was planning something bigger. Among the financial documents were contracts indicating he was transferring jointly owned properties into his name. Claire understood immediately. Mark wasn't just emotionally betraying her, he was also attempting to undermine her financial security. Meanwhile, Sophie, ever the loyal friend, helped Claire cope with the emotional toll of the betrayal. "You need to play this smart, Claire. He thinks you won't fight back. Show him what you're capable of." Sophie also began keeping a closer eye on Mark and Emily, reporting anything suspicious she noticed during social events or casual interactions. One such observation revealed that Mark was planning a business trip that coincided exactly with the dates of a reservation at a luxury resort in Hawaii, for 2 guests. As she investigated further, Claire realized just how much influence Emily had over Mark's decisions at work. He had promoted employees close to Emily and allocated resources to projects in which she had interests. This wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was a power play that could affect both their careers. Claire began to suspect that Emily wasn't just interested in Mark as a lover but also in his social and financial standing. Amid the chaos, Claire received an unexpected call from Linda, Mark's mother. Linda had always had a warm relationship with Claire, but in recent months, she had seemed distant. Now, Claire understood why. "Claire, I need to talk to you." "It's about Emily," Linda said, sounding concerned. At their meeting, Linda revealed something Claire never could have imagined. She knew Emily wasn't biologically related to Mark's father and had doubts about her story from the beginning. Mark brought this girl home out of nowhere, claiming she was his sister. But something never felt right. She got close to him so quickly, and he never explained things clearly. Linda admitted she had always been suspicious, but didn't want to interfere in Claire's marriage. Now, feeling that something was seriously wrong, she was willing to help. With all the pieces of the puzzle falling into place, Claire knew she had to act quickly. Mark's business trip was the perfect opportunity to confront him and expose the truth. She decided to prepare a comprehensive dossier with all the evidence she had against Mark and Emily, photos, financial documents, and records of illegal transactions. Consult her attorneys about the best way to protect her assets and expose Mark's financial fraud. Arrange a final confrontation with Emily, but this time with all her cards on the table. Emily, sensing that Claire had grown more distant and cautious, began acting more provocatively. During a family dinner, for example, she casually mentioned a trip Mark had taken, hinting that it was special. Claire responded coldly but was seething inside. Meanwhile, Mark continued to wear his mask as the perfect husband, oblivious to the fact that Claire was on the brink of exposing everything he was hiding. The decisive moment was approaching. Claire organized the information as if preparing for the most important case of her life. The evidence collected by Greg Harper and Peter Lang was meticulously arranged: financial transfers, photos from the hotel, documents tied to the shell company, and records disproving Emily's claim to be Mark's sister. Now, it was time to reveal the truth, but Claire knew she needed to be strategic. A direct confrontation without a plan could allow them to escape the consequences. Claire chose the moment carefully. Mark and Emily were hosting a dinner party at their apartment for a small group of friends and colleagues, including Sophie and Linda. Claire decided this would be the perfect stage to unveil everything. On the night of the event, Claire dressed impeccably, projecting a calm confidence that concealed her inner turmoil. Mark appeared at ease, charming the guests with his usual charisma, while Emily radiated her usual confidence. Sophie, aware of what was about to unfold, stayed watchful, ready to support Claire. When everyone was served and the dinner had reached its peak, Claire raised her wine glass. I'd like to take this moment to express my gratitude to all of you for being here. And especially to Mark and Emily, who show us just how important trust and loyalty are in any relationship. Mark looked at her, confused, while Emily let out a nervous laugh. But you know what they say, Claire continued, placing her glass on the table. Trust only exists when there are no secrets. And I've recently learned some fascinating things that I think everyone here will want to know. Claire walked to the console table where her laptop was strategically placed. Connecting it to the television, she began displaying the evidence, photos of Mark and Emily at the hotel, financial transfers, and documents tied to the shell company. The silence in the room was deafening. Linda, her hands trembling, looked at her son in horror. Mark, what is this? She asked, her voice shaking. Emily tried to intervene. Claire, you're overreacting. This doesn't mean anything. But Claire was prepared. She then revealed the documents that disproved Emily's claim of being Mark's sister. You're no one's sister here, Emily. You're a liar and an opportunist. Mark, caught off guard, tried to regain control. Claire, can we talk about this in private? No, Mark. You had your chance. Now everyone here knows who you really are. Emily, on the other hand, lost her composure. Do you think this matters? He loves me, Claire. He always has, and you know it. Everything you have, your money, your home, even him, was never really yours. The room erupted in murmurs and gasps of shock. Sophie finally stood up and pointed to the door. I think it's time for the two of you to leave. Claire doesn't deserve any more of this. Before Mark and Emily left the apartment, Claire delivered her final blow. Oh, and Mark, I'd like you to know that I've already filed for divorce. And thanks to the evidence of financial fraud and infidelity, my lawyers have ensured that you won't keep anything you built at my expense. Mark went pale, unable to muster a response. Emily stormed out, slamming the door in fury. In the days that followed, Claire began to feel the weight of the betrayal lift. It was painful, but liberating. Linda, ashamed of Mark's actions, offered her unconditional support, and Sophie remained steadfast by her side. Mark tried to contact Claire multiple times, but she ignored him. He was finally facing the consequences of his choices: no home, no reputation, and no Emily, who vanished from his life as soon as she realized the money had dried up. After the public confrontation, Claire found herself in a mixture of relief and emotional exhaustion. The revelation of Mark's affair with Emily had not only destroyed their marriage, but also deeply shaken the image she had of herself. Yet Claire knew she had to stay strong. The next step was to rebuild her life, safeguard her future, and reclaim her confidence. Mark suffered a devastating fallout after the dinner party. The scandal spread quickly among the couple's friends and his colleagues. News of the financial fraud reached Mark's business partners, who immediately launched an audit. When the irregularities were confirmed, he was fired and sued by the company for embezzlement. Without a job and without Claire's support, Mark attempted to reconcile with her. He showed up at her office on a rainy day, begging for a chance to explain. Claire, I made mistakes, but I was manipulated. Emily, she wasn't who I thought she was. But Claire, now stronger, didn't waver. Mark, you had countless chances to be honest. You chose to lie and betray. There's nothing more to say. As for Emily, she disappeared as quickly as she had entered Claire's life. After realizing that Mark could no longer support her, she severed all ties with him. Rumors suggested she had left Chicago, perhaps in search of another target for her manipulations. Claire, however, had no interest in following Emily's movements. To her, Emily was merely a closed chapter, a reminder that not everything is as it seems. Linda, Mark's mother, was deeply embarrassed by her son's actions. Feeling responsible for not questioning Emily's past more thoroughly, she sought to make amends. Claire, I want you to know that you'll always be part of our family, even if Mark has lost that right. Linda's gesture was an unexpected comfort to Claire, who found genuine support in her amid the chaos. Without Mark in her life, Claire decided it was time to do something for herself, something beyond work and the challenges of the past. She began attending therapy to process the betrayal and rebuild her self-esteem. You are not defined by what happened to you, her therapist said during a session. you are defined by what you do moving forward." Inspired by these words, Claire started seeking new experiences. She enrolled in cooking classes, a passion she had set aside during her marriage. She also traveled to places she had always wanted to visit, starting with Paris, where she spent a week exploring the city and rediscovering who she was without anyone else's expectations. The divorce process was finalized within a few months, and Claire emerged from it with her finances protected and her home intact. Mark tried to contest the terms, but the evidence Claire and her lawyers had gathered made his fight futile. During a meeting with Sophie, Claire remarked, "It's funny, you know? I thought losing Mark would be the end of everything. But, in reality, it was the beginning of something much greater." Sophie smiled. "Because now you know what you're capable of. And no one can take that away from you." Although the pain of betrayal would never completely fade, Claire found a deeper meaning in the experience. She learned to trust herself more, pay attention to the signs, and, most importantly, prioritize her own happiness. She also realized that her strength came from her choices, not from those of others. Looking out at Lake Michigan from her apartment window on a sunny day, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The months following the conclusion of the divorce marked a new chapter in Claire's life. Despite all the pain and emotional losses, she managed to turn the devastating experience into a starting point for a fresh beginning filled with possibilities. Therapy became a cornerstone of this process. During one session, Claire reflected on how she had neglected her own dreams to sustain her marriage with Mark. "I was always more concerned with keeping up appearances than listening to myself," she admitted. With her therapist's encouragement, Claire began exploring old hobbies and creating new goals for her life. The cooking class she had started became a sanctuary. The act of cooking, experimenting with flavors and creating something new, helped calm her mind and sparked a joy she hadn't felt in years. Soon, Claire began sharing her creations with friends and even colleagues at work. This led to an unexpected idea: starting a small blog to share recipes and reflections about her journey. As she expanded her personal life, Claire also decided to shift her professional focus. Instead of concentrating solely on corporate law, she became interested in cases involving the protection of women in vulnerable situations. This led to a partnership with a local organization supporting women who were victims of domestic violence and emotional abuse. Claire dedicated part of her free time to providing pro bono legal counsel, helping women break free from toxic relationships and rebuild their lives. "It's therapeutic, in a way," Claire confided to Sophie over coffee. "Helping others find their strength reminds me of my own." After months of hard work and self-discovery, Claire decided she needed time for herself. She planned a trip to the West Coast, including a visit to California, the state Emily had claimed to have grown up in. While the trip's focus was relaxation and exploration, Claire felt a curiosity to learn more about Emily's origins. During a visit to San Francisco, she managed to locate a bar where Emily had once worked, as mentioned by Greg Harper during his investigation. Speaking with Emily's former colleagues, Claire confirmed something she had already suspected: Emily had a pattern. Before getting involved with Mark, she had seduced and deceived other men, always targeting those with financial stability. Claire realized that Emily wasn't just a liar, she was a skilled opportunist who used charm to manipulate others. This discovery brought Claire an unexpected sense of closure. Emily wasn't invincible, her actions stemmed from weakness, not strength. While Claire's focus remained on her own independence, she began to notice that, over time, she was open to the possibility of a new relationship. During a fundraising event for the organization she worked with, Claire met Ryan Carter, an architect who, like her, had gone through a complicated divorce. Ryan was different from Mark. He was reserved, thoughtful, and, above all, genuine. They started talking casually, sharing experiences about starting over and learning to appreciate life's small moments. Claire, however, didn't rush into anything. This time, she knew her happiness didn't depend on someone else. Even so, the possibility of sharing her life with someone again brought a new sense of lightness to her days. With her blog gaining traction and her work with the organization expanding, Claire began receiving invitations to speak at events and conferences. She used these opportunities to share her story, not as a victim, but as someone who found strength amidst chaos. We don't always choose what happens in our lives, she said during a talk for women. But we can choose how we respond. And I chose to become someone who isn't defined by what was done to me, but by what I did with it. On a sunny afternoon, Claire sat on her balcony overlooking the lake, writing a post for her blog. Some betrayals knock us down. Others teach us to fly. The truth is, while I didn't choose what happened, I chose to rebuild myself. And today, I'm stronger, more whole, and happier than I ever imagined I could be. Claire closed the laptop, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. For the first time in a long while, she looked to the future with hope and, above all, confidence in herself. Claire was at a point in her life where she finally felt in control. The divorce was finalized, Mark and Emily were part of her past, and her new routine, both personal and professional, was a constant source of fulfillment. However, as with any good story, the past wasn't entirely buried. One Friday afternoon, while Claire was reviewing documents in her office, she received a call that unsettled her. It was Linda, her ex-mother-in-law, and her voice carried an urgency Claire hadn't heard since the worst days of the divorce. "Claire, I need to talk to you. It's about Mark." Reluctantly, Claire agreed to meet Linda for coffee. When they met, Linda revealed something troubling: Mark was trying to overturn the terms of the divorce. He had hired a new lawyer and was claiming that the agreement had been unfair. "I don't know what he hopes to gain, but he's obsessed," Linda said, visibly distressed. Claire remained calm, but inside she felt a wave of indignation. Mark had already lost everything that mattered because of his own betrayal. Now, it seemed he was determined to drag her back into the chaos. When discussing the situation with Peter Lang, the investigator who had helped her before, Claire received some valuable advice. "Mark is trying to regain control because he knows he's lost power over you," Peter said. "If you show him you're unshaken, he'll realize he has no influence over your life anymore." Peter also suggested Claire take another look at Mark's financial records. He suspected that for someone like Mark, letting go of his position of prestige and stability wouldn't come easily. If he was trying to come back, there had to be more at play. With Peter's help and her own connections, Claire uncovered something that completely changed the course of the situation. Mark was deeply in debt. After the scandal and his dismissal, he had lost almost all his money. He was trying to sell assets that didn't belong to him. Mark had forged documents to attempt to transfer a property still in Claire's name. Emily was back. Despite disappearing for months, she had reconnected with Mark, and the two were now conspiring to recover money at any cost. When Claire learned the extent of this new betrayal, she realized it was time to act, and this time, she wouldn't leave any room for doubt. Claire decided this confrontation would be different. She wouldn't just protect her assets, but also ensure that Mark and Emily faced the legal consequences of their actions. She gathered her legal team and devised a plan. Freeze Mark's assets. With the new documents proving attempted fraud, Claire obtained a court order to block his access to any assets tied to her. Sue Emily. Using evidence of Emily's past, Claire filed a case for conspiracy and unjust enrichment. Expose the scheme publicly. Claire decided she would no longer hide. With Sophie's help, she prepared a public statement detailing the events and debunking any attempts by Mark to tarnish her reputation. Days before the court hearing to address Mark's new actions, Claire received an unexpected message. It was from Emily. "We need to talk. I know you want revenge, but Mark is destroyed. He doesn't deserve this." Claire was perplexed. The tone of the message was manipulative, but also revealed something deeper. Emily was growing desperate. She knew the house of cards was about to collapse. Instead of responding, Claire stayed focused on her plans. This time, she knew she had the upper hand. The night before the hearing, Mark made one last attempt. He showed up at Claire's apartment door, apparently drunk, and begged her to reconsider. "Claire, we had something special. You can't erase that over one mistake," he said, his voice slurred. But Claire didn't give in. "Mark, what we had ended the moment you chose to betray me. And now, everything you're trying to do only proves how much control you've lost. Tomorrow will be the end." Mark left without saying another word, but Claire knew he was furious, and, above all, defeated. The morning of the court hearing arrived, bringing with it a mix of tension and determination for Claire. Dressed in an impeccable suit and carrying the carefully gathered evidence in her briefcase, she felt this was her defining moment. In the courtroom, Mark and Emily sat on the opposite side. He looked haggard, with deep circles under his eyes and slouched shoulders, but he still wore an expression of barely concealed arrogance. Emily, in contrast, kept her chin high, as if she were above it all, but her eyes betrayed her nervousness. Claire's attorney presented the evidence compellingly. First, the attempts by Mark to forge documents and transfer properties. Then, the financial transfers to Emily, now directly linked to Mark's fraudulent activities. These actions not only violate the terms of the divorce agreement, argued Claire's attorney, but they also constitute fraud against my client. Mark tried to defend himself. I was desperate, he said, standing to speak. I made mistakes, but I didn't do it to hurt her. I did it because I needed a chance to start over. But Claire wasn't interested in his excuses. She held her gaze steady, refusing to let the emotions bubbling inside her show. When it was Emily's turn, her mask began to crack. Claire's attorney presented evidence showing how Emily had infiltrated Mark and Claire's lives through lies, manipulating them both for her own benefit. Photos of Emily with other targets from her past were displayed, and testimonies from people she had deceived reinforced the case. Emily tried to push back. This isn't fair. I never forced Mark to do anything. He made his own decisions. The judge, however, seemed unimpressed by her arguments. The pivotal moment came when Claire decided to speak directly to the court. Her voice was calm but carried a resolute firmness. For years, I believed in a marriage built on trust. Mark destroyed that, not just through betrayal, but with lies and manipulation. He tried to ruin my security, my reputation, and my peace. Today, I'm here to ensure he no longer has the power to hurt me, or anyone else. A heavy silence filled the courtroom as Claire's words echoed. After hours of arguments, the judge delivered his decision. Mark was found guilty of attempted fraud and ordered to compensate Claire for the damages he had caused. He was also fined a substantial amount, and his remaining assets were frozen. Emily was ordered to respond to charges of unjust enrichment and was required to return the money she had received. The judge also authorized Claire to proceed with a civil lawsuit against her. Upon hearing the verdict, Mark lowered his head, finally realizing he had lost everything. Emily left the courtroom in a hurry, avoiding Claire's gaze. When it was all over, Claire walked out of the courthouse, feeling an immense weight lift off her shoulders. Sophie was waiting outside with a proud smile. You did it, Claire. You finally ended this. Claire smiled back, but not out of vengeance. What she felt was something far greater, liberation. After the court's decision, Claire finally felt that her life had entered a new chapter. Mark and Emily were removed from her story, and the weight of their betrayals no longer haunted her. Although the process had been exhausting, Claire knew she had regained something more important than material possessions: her dignity, her strength, and her freedom. Mark faced even greater struggles after the judgment. With his reputation ruined and no financial resources, he disappeared from the social circle that had once idolized him. Occasionally, Claire heard rumors that he was trying to rebuild his life in a smaller town, but she no longer cared. To Claire, he was nothing more than a lesson learned. Emily, on the other hand, faced the consequences of her actions. The civil lawsuit filed by Claire resulted in her losing the little money she still had, forcing her to abandon her luxurious lifestyle. Claire heard that Emily had left the country, but she didn't waste time worrying about her whereabouts. With the case finally closed, Claire decided to invest more time in herself. She continued to grow her cooking blog, which now reached thousands of people. The space wasn't just about recipes, but also about transforming difficult moments into personal growth. I've learned that life can surprise us in the worst ways, she wrote in a post. But sometimes, it's in those challenges that we find our true strength. Additionally, Claire continued her volunteer work, helping women break free from abusive relationships. Her personal story became a source of inspiration, and she was invited to speak at events and conferences, something that once seemed unimaginable. While Claire's focus remained on her independence, Ryan Carter, the architect she had met months earlier, remained a part of her life. They began building a slow, careful relationship based on mutual respect and honesty. Unlike Mark, Ryan didn't try to control or shape Claire. He encouraged her to pursue her dreams and celebrated her achievements. For Claire, this was a new kind of love, one that didn't demand but offered freedom. On a quiet afternoon, as she watched the sunset from her apartment balcony, Claire reflected on everything that had happened. She no longer felt anger or sadness, only gratitude for having survived and thrived. She opened her laptop and began to write. Sometimes, the most painful things that happen to us are actually the gateway to something greater. Today, I know who I am. I am strong. I am resilient. And I am free. Months later, Claire was honored for her work with women in vulnerable situations. As she walked onto the stage to receive the award, she looked out at the audience and saw Sophie and Ryan smiling at her. For the first time in years, Claire felt that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Holding the award in her hand and peace in her heart, she began her speech. My story is not about revenge. It's about starting over. And I hope everyone here knows that no matter how far you fall, it's always possible to rise again, and soar higher than ever before.